Okay. Yeah, so thank you very much, Dana, for the introduction. And I have a pretty complicated position. So I'm kind of part-time still at Radboud University, where I'm with the Donders and this SMI program that Dana mentioned. And then I'm also part-time at the OnePlanet Research Center, which I will describe also in this talk a bit more about what it is. But first, indeed, I think it would be good for me to just better describe what I will talk about, because of course this is an fNIRS consortium, so it should be very relevant to fNIRS. So I'll talk first about where we are, where I see the modern fNIRS experiment, and then also talk about this OnePlanet Research Center and the things that we do there, particularly towards data platforms and as well as these digital twins that I will mention about in this talk. And then at the end, hopefully draw kind of the parallels about why we think that what we do at OnePlanet also fits with, of course, this type of research infrastructure. And I think that's going to be particularly interesting. So a bit of, for those of you who are, of course, new to NIRS or being attracted to joining NIRS, this is what I think we can think of when we think about NIRS research. So we have something like a little baby who's moving around, and we would love to figure out some signals going on in the brain of this baby, especially if this baby's can't go in an MRI, for instance, if the baby would take too long to put on an EEG cap and so on. So it's a really nice technique to at least get some sort of cortical activity out of a subject like that. But this picture doesn't really do full justice to those of us who know about the experiments that you need to do in NIRS. So if this baby's twisting his head around and moving and all these kinds of things, you might measure some signals, but how could you possibly know what those signals mean? So a typical fNIRS experiment, unfortunately, probably looks something more like this, right? So you have the NIRS device on your subject. Can everybody see my mouse by curious? Maybe I need to put on a laser pointer. There we go. Okay, so if you think of a subject, they'd probably be wearing a NIRS device, but we'd also want to include some other type of information in these types of experiments, where they are. Probably we need something a bit more experimentally complicated besides just completely freely moving. Maybe the cameras would certainly be enough, but you might have other devices like a treadmill in this case, or some other sensors that is delivering something or measuring something. You have multiple computers here trying to integrate all of this equipment together. And so these experiments are quite complicated. And so one of the things we want to do for this research infrastructure is address this type of thing in the modern fNIRS experiment. Again, yes, so to summarize, yeah, we have unique groups and complex requirements, but that is both the benefit of NIRS, but also something that we all need to work on as researchers. Some of the review articles coming out more recently have highlighted this, and they've mentioned that, if you're thinking of, in particular, doing NIRS experiments, actually reaching the brain with your signal, and that you're not actually measuring signals that could be related to superficial blood vessels or motions or something like this. So for a lot of these patients or participants, yeah, being bald and being a baby, that's actually to your advantage. But also, we now know that it's good to have not just these long channels, but these short channels. And it's also really important that we're going to have all these measurements that can take into account different physiological changes. So what I will actually mention about in this talk more is, first, I'll talk a little bit about my own experience in fNIRS at dealing with this with my PhD student on using short and long channels, and then also address these systemic and noise and physiological changes that I think we can take into account by integrating all these different sensors together. So just to review, or maybe it's the first time some of us have heard of this, what is a short channel? Well, the principles of fNIRS say that what we're expecting is between a source and a detector, you are having this scattering of light that can be detected, and it's got to pass through the skin, the blood vessels, the skull, and reach the human brain. And then some of that is going to be refracted, and it's able to be detected by the detector. If you have these short channels, the idea is that they won't reach the brain. They will still get the superficial signals in the skull, but they won't get the human brain. So if you can take into account the signals coming from them, simple subtraction, but we found something more sophisticated like regression is what you need to do. You then can get at the signal of interest and remove most of this noise. So I'll give an example of, this was a study done by our PhD student, Helena Cox, who's just actually ready to defend. So we started off, we were doing a study where we placed sources and detectors over the primary motor cortex, both here at the kind of the over the hand region and here also over the leg region. And we wanted to compare the signals between hand versus leg. And so what we saw at first was, well, if we look at signals from the hand, you see this kind of characteristic hemodynamic response of the oxygenated and deoxygenated hemoglobin, HbO and HbR, and that looks, on inspection, it looks reasonable. And then we looked at the leg and we got this majorly strange signal. And so without short channels, this is what you're kind of dealing with. So if you're just dealing with the hand, you might conclude that, okay, well, we're seeing some simple, reasonable activity. This is what happened when we were able to regress out the short channel signals. And what you can see here is just how much better the signal is coming from the hand, and also how much more reasonable it makes sense if you think about it. This is where this hand region is, or hand knob of the motor cortex. So it makes more sense that the signal should be resolved to be on this channel and not on these ones. And if you look at what the leg now looks like, it looks a bit different. It doesn't have that major sine wave anymore. It now has more realistic signals, and these signals actually are also sensible because they should be coming more from the leg region here if you think of how this fits with the homunculus on the central sulcus. But if you didn't have these short channels, you really wouldn't be able to get at these signals. So this is kind of just an overall snapshot of these different channels and what you could get when you were just moving your fingers or moving your leg up and down and regressing of short channels. It makes a fair bit of sense now if we see kind of the bigger picture. But one of the other things that we did in this experiment was these were just what I'm showing you here, simple things. The person's moving their fingers in a finger tapping task, or they're moving their leg up and down in a foot stomping task. And that we think was moving the head and causing that systemic fluctuations that we needed to regress with the short channels. But we wanted to move this to another experimental level that we would do in NIRS experiments. It's not just asking something simple like moving your fingers or moving your leg, but maybe adding some sort of cognitive task to this. So we wanted to then compare, well, what if it was an automatic signal versus a voluntary signal for either of these effectors? And one of the things that we found was, if you compare, say, a power analysis, like how many subjects would you need to get reliable signals? If all we were asking was moving versus baseline, we only needed 6 subjects for just wiggling your fingers and only 12 for stamping your foot. But the minute we move this up to a higher level question, what's the difference between doing an automatic versus a non-automatic task? In order to, say, get reliable effect size, we needed, well, 60 for the finger and close to 50 for the foot. So that's a lot of subjects that you need to be able to say something reliable in an fNIRS experiment where there's someone doing motion, but also where you're asking something kind of higher level. So that just goes to show in part not only about the need for regressing these physiological noise, but also we think, especially this fits with any neuroimaging experiment, the need for large data sets, or the need to be able to do pilot studies on existing data to be able to figure out how many subjects you actually need for your question, and so on. So it fits with the principles that we think is also relevant for a large consortium like this on open data and being able to collaborate on data sets. So if I think of what I just said is we for sure know short channels. I think pretty much anybody starting in NIRS now should be aware of the necessity for that, and also that you need to regress motion, systemic signals, other physiological noise. And that kind of leads us towards a need for, well, basically taking into account different sensors. So besides just your optodes for NIRS, maybe you have motion sensors, maybe you have cameras, maybe you have position sensors. There's other different type of information that you're going to need. Also thinking this is I would say it's less of a need to get data out, but certainly important for modern neuroimaging studies in general is the idea of sharing data and having common pipelines. And this leads us to the fit with what I'll talk about next with OnePlanet is the understanding that we need kind of data platforms and ways that this data can be shared. So for anybody who comes from fMRI, Russ Poldrack is a very famous person who people very much respect in the field. So he and his I assume trainee or colleague has weighed in on this recently about how important it is to have data sets and being able to combine data and share and be able to replicate findings, especially when we know that sometimes previous studies were probably underpowered. So now I will just kind of go off on a little bit of a, well, not a tangent, but a different direction than what I was talking about with fNIRS, to describe a bit about where I'm working now, which is this OnePlanet Research Center and how that came about and how that really fits with this type of research. So what is this OnePlanet Research Center? Well, it's a strategic collaboration, as Dana mentioned, between Radboud University, Wageningen University, and IMEC. And these are two universities in the province of Gelderland. So that's why it involves them. And IMEC is a large nonprofit company from Belgium that also has a presence here. This is Leuven, Belgium, and this is Eindhoven in the Netherlands. So it has a Dutch presence in the Netherlands. But now the OnePlanet Research Center makes a new collaboration for both IMEC and the two universities of Gelderland. So it's positioned in Gelderland, shared between offices in Wageningen as well as at Radboud. What I think most people probably in this consortium are broadly aware of is that Radboud, of course, that has a psychology department, Donders Institute, where I work, and the Radboud University Medical Center in Wageningen is famous for agriculture and food research. IMEC, maybe people don't know what it is, but it's a nonprofit R&D center from Belgium, very large, about 4,500 employees all throughout the world, different sites. It has semiconductor fabs, and its idea, while it's non-profit, it has revenue of close to 600 million, at least back in 2020. And the idea is that it, as a nonprofit R&D center, can create digital and nanotechnology solutions that can be utilized in society and utilized by industry. And a number of startups and spin-offs have come out of IMEC, and they also have a technology venture fund to help with growth. And so the idea of OnePlanet is that the technology of IMEC is combined with the knowledge of Radboud University and Wageningen University, so that there's specific solutions towards health, nutrition, and behavior and agri-food. And it's not a complete division. It doesn't say that Radboud handles health, nutrition, and behavior and Wageningen handles agri and food, and that's it. There is, of course, interactions, as there should be in OnePlanet at kind of the whole company level. But of course, the knowledge of these two universities combined with the knowledge of IMEC, we're working towards solutions and I work on the health side towards, say, personalized health. So if you can take data coming from different sensors and a data platform to combine all of it, deal with the security, the privacy, all of these kinds of things, you're really working towards building kind of models of a person's physiology. Now, that leads me towards talking about digital twins. And we'll get to that in a sec, but overall, we can say that what OnePlanet then does is has sensor technologies and digital technologies, and then is able to put it together to create basically analysis toolboxes that can lead to applications. And so we can have applications that an individual can use, or potentially someone else in the healthcare system can use. And on the agricultural side, of course, it would be for farmers or industries in agri-food. So one thing in particular that OnePlanet has been working on, also with some external partners, is building the types of platforms that could be needed to integrate this type of data coming from different types of sensors. So one of the things that it's now, you can find this on the internet, is called OpenPlanet, but it's kind of a it came from a European Development Fund grant, and it was built, and now it's at the next phase where it's looking to expand. But the idea of this is for safe and easy sharing of data for research applications. And in a nutshell, what you do with a platform like this is someone can request data sets share data sets, but still being in control. So you can determine who gets to see your data and what data is transferred and so on. And of course, this would especially be relevant if you're having sensitive patient data. And then also to collaborate with people, so that you can have different analysis toolboxes and algorithms within this infrastructure that you can use and apply on the data. So we can kind of see OpenPlanet as kind of the principle, but from there we're working on health data platforms, right? So you can kind of spawn it in different directions towards health or towards agri and different use cases, because if you're going towards a health data platform, eventually you're going to be dealing with different types of data, then especially different types of requirements for security and safety and things like this than you might otherwise. So we can think of it as a special case of these platforms as a health data platform that will take into account sensors that are relevant to measuring one's health and physiology, and to be able to integrate this in some sort of platform. So we might think that the type of people that are working on this are sensor managers and engineers, kind of dealing with the different types of sensors and what they look like and what the data's coming off of them, and data scientists and data stewards that are dealing with the security and dealing with how the algorithms can combine it and so on. And so this existing team making these platforms at OnePlanet it works in an agile way. So it does have these expertise that different expertise on these aspects of the sensor side, or also the data management side. And the idea is that then we can like tailor it towards different use cases, towards different types of sensors, whether they're commercial sensors or sensors that somebody has built themselves. And of course, the data has to be compatible and interoperable and everything for this to make sense. So what then exactly would we do this? I mentioned on those pictures, and also it's in my initial title about digital twins. So first I can maybe explain what exactly a digital twin is and where it came from. So it actually came from the manufacturing industry. So I believe it started with airplanes, but you could also think of it with ships or something like this. So if you want to know if an airplane is going to be safe when you introduce a new engine, or you change the wing structure or something like this, it's too expensive and difficult to build an airplane and then test it by crashing it, for instance. So with something large like an airplane or a boat, and this has been around since I think the 1970s when it was first proposed, was you're trying to get as much data as possible that you can simulate that structure in a digital environment. And then you can use things like, in a modern case, we can use things like everything from virtual reality to the incorporation of different sensors, building models. CAD is drawings that designers and engineers have to be able to model something. And then of course now we can add AI and also there's the output data visualization. So all of this goes into essentially making a digital twin of a physical object so that you can run simulations on it. So OnePlanet, it should be known, no one thinks that we can make a digital twin of an entire human. But we can make the digital twin we are working on of a particular disease or particular disease process, right? So if you're studying some sort of disorder, and you know that the certain signals that are relevant to that disorder could come from the gut, could come from the intestine, could also come from arousal physiology and so on, you want to collect this different data. So some of the hardware that OnePlanet is working on relates to sensing of the gut, so gut health. So gut health digital twin is of course very interesting. The idea is you get these different types of data sets. We need those types of platforms that I described before to be able to ingest that data from these different sensors, be able to handle it in a secure way. And then with a digital twin, what you're looking for is to be able to simulate, or what we want to do is to be able to think about what is going on in a person's status related to health or disease, and this could lead to recommendations or clinical interventions. So that's ultimately what's interesting for OnePlanet. But you could also think it's kind of the structure is very similar to what we would be wanting to do as NIRS researchers in this kind of multimodal community at a large level. So that's where I think there's a link. So of course we would have NIRS data, but we might also need to connect heart rate data, video, audio data of what's going on in the room, other sensors for multimodal, wearables to track motion, and so on. And maybe you're not trying to necessarily build a digital twin, but in many ways, if you have all the sensors, you could imagine a digital twin of I wouldn't want to say digital twin of depression, because you're only going to get like cortical signals, for instance, but a digital twin of something that's related to a neuro-related question is, of course, possible to start adding more data together to at least get in that direction. And then a digital twin would, of course, want to do something on an individual level for that person to provide recommendations. But certainly at the group level, the infrastructure is there to build these kinds of collaborations on this data. So this is what I wanted to present today. So we have plenty of times, I think, to discuss this. But digital twin, it resolves around this cross-modal data combinations and analytics to simulate health or disease state. OnePlanet's goals is towards personalized health recommendations. But indeed, these building blocks can be extended to, I think, many of the same things that we would be interested in the NIRS community. So I think I can stop sharing.